You're listening to Psych with Mike, and the most important way to support the show is to find us on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. So no matter how you listen to Psych with Mike, find us on YouTube, smash the subscribe button, and we really appreciate it. Now, here's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan.
And this is Brett Newcomb.
You are newly back.
I am.
Yeah. Rejuvenated.
One hopes.
One hopes. You are a big believer in the refreshing power of travel
Escape.
and vacation.
Travel,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Which is true. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on the psychology of that. And I think that there are some people who are very good at recharging their batteries with that kind of thing. And I think there are some people who it creates a tremendous amount of anxiety and
Vacations can be incredibly stressful.
Right.
I mean, you have to plan them, you have to pack for them, you have to pay for them, you have all kinds of decisions to make about how am I going to spend my time. And they can also be enjoyable.
right.
My wife and I laugh because she is an incredible planner, and she plans and does all these things. And I can pack, like if I know we're going out of town next month, I can pack today, and she won't be able to pack until the day before.
Right. Well, you used to tell me that all the time. I'm packed and ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
Literally 4 weeks in advance. I'd be like, "Are you not going to wear any clothes between now and then?" But you just apparently have so many clothes.
You know, that's part of the problem.
That
Nudity is
you could
something
pack,
I really recommend.
you could pack your entire wardrobe and still be okay.
It's like the Jack Reacher books, you know. All he does is carry a portable toothbrush and buy new clothes every time he needs them, throw them away. Anyway, we digress. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, we have what I feel like is exciting news. I hope that
I think so. I'm very
you would agree
pleased
with that.
Yeah.
But we are ready to announce the release of our book.
We have been writing a book together about therapy and psychology for the better part of a year. We've worked together for a long time. We worked in private practice together for over 20 years. We've both taught at the same universities in the counseling programs. You've taught in other universities in their programs. I've written a couple of books with someone else. Now I've written a book with you, and it is ready to be published. And within the month, it's going to be available, and people that are interested would like to look at it can get it. We wrote a book that is a combination of our two focused perspectives. My intention behind writing the book and my prayer is that I have written something for my contribution that explains what I feel about doing therapy, how it should be done, the purposes behind doing it, the ways to do it, and what the goal is from the therapist's perspective. Talking about boundaries, issues, concerns, how to understand when somebody brand new walks into your office, what do you think? What do you see? How do you help? And you approach things from a different perspective. It may be an inclusive one, may include a lot of the things that I just mentioned, but you have a different understanding of how to approach it. So you wrote about that perspective. So we wrote 10 chapters, and each of us gave our take on the topic of the chapter. And so anybody who wants to can read it all, if they want to read it at all, or they can just read my stuff, which is incredibly insightful and easy to read. Or they read your stuff, which is more lumbering and
dry
and complex. And Anyway, so that's what we did, and it is now available and can be obtained at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and hopefully book dealers wherever you are. But if not, we will have links and to the publisher, and they can look online and find these links with the podcast today. And if they're interested, they can obtain it.
And just to look at a couple of the chapters that are in the table of contents. So we have what is an emotion, what is attachment, what is self-esteem, what is anxiety, what is stress, what is personality. And those are just a handful of the chapter prompts. And what we did was that you would write and we wouldn't read each other's stuff. So
that was a requirement. You don't read my stuff until you've written your stuff.
Right. And so for full disclosure, you were always ahead of me in the writing process. And so that's, yes, what you would say is, hey, don't read my stuff until you write your
I
stuff.
don't want you stealing my stuff.
And even though that's true, there were a lot of times when we had some crossover.
Well, yeah, because we've worked together for 20 years, and what we've often commented on when we worked in the same office is that we see something incredibly differently at the beginning. I get a client, and I'm staffing the new client, because you always have to have, and there's a point that we make regularly in the book and in our conversations, you have to have collegial supervision. You have to have professional supervision, but people that know about therapy and what you're trying to do. There are issues about coming up with a diagnosis, whether or not that's an appropriate thing to do or an inappropriate thing to do. How to understand the difference between a diagnosis for insurance coverage and medical payments and a person sitting in front of you. How to have conversations with the person sitting in front of you to get the perspective and the picture of their presentation. I come in to see you, you're like, why are you here, Brett? And I'm like, well, this is going on in my life. Very often as a male, I'm like, well, my boss said I had to come in, the court said I had to come in, my wife said I had to come in, my daughter said I had to come in. Sometimes because the man says, I hit a wall and I need some help in getting around the wall. And so then where do you go? How do you start the conversation? How do you begin to understand it? How do I make what I call rolling assessments as I learn more from you? I'm assessing your nonverbals. I don't know you, so I don't know what the twitch on your eye means, or if you constantly drum your knee, or you do finger motion things with your hands. What does that mean? Is that intentional? Is it unconscious? Is it stress and anxiety driven? How are the boundaries developed in our conversations? There are all kinds of conversations that students in counseling programs will have about how do you personalize your office? Do you have pictures of your family on the wall? Do you have books that you like to read and magazines that you like to read on the table? How does the client see that? And then you have conversations. Do you spend time talking about, well, we just went on vacation. Where did you go? What do you like to do? Oh, I like to do that. Can we be buddies? Can we go to lunch? Can we have coffee? You have a client that wants to come in first every time. I want to be the first client of the day because I want you when you're fresh and alert and ready. And I'll bring coffee and donuts. Do you allow that? Is that within the appropriate boundaries? How do you say no? If I come in and say, Mike, I feel so much better since I've been seeing you for the last 6 months. My life has just cleaned itself up and everything is charming and focused, and I brought you this present. I want to give you this gift as a token of my appreciation, but also so you'll remember me once I've gone. I want you to set it up on your bookshelf and look at it every time you come to work, so you'll think about me, because I want to leave some of myself behind, because I'm taking some of you with me. How do you understand that? How do you deal with that? So we've tried to write our perspectives of those things in this book.
And what I really liked about the process was this interplay where one of us would write and then the other one would write, and it felt to me very comfortable. What my hope is that people will will get the same kind of feeling by reading the book that they would get by listening to the podcast. That it's very similar to that, although in a longer format.
Well, and again, we have different perspectives. Your perspective is much more physiologically grounded. You're interested in the science of it, and one of the ways that I've attempted to describe that, you can maybe do a better job of that, is your perspective is more globally psychological. Mine is more intensely counseling, therapeutically focused. So you bring more to the table in terms of a larger understanding of the psychology field and its considerations that might apply to an individual client. So you're always talking about the frontal cortex and the synapses and the neurons and the neurotypical behaviors and those kind of concepts. And I'm more focused on, where does it hurt? How long does it hurt? Can you do anything about it hurting? How's your life distorted? And you get there. to start this conversation. We may begin with that different perspective, but if people spend time with us, we very frequently get to the same place at the end.
That distinction between psychology and counseling was not one. I don't remember the first time you said that. I don't remember if that was on mic or off mic, but you did say that. And
Mic is a microphone, not mic is a microphone.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've pondered that several times since then, and I really, really like that distinction, and it makes a lot of sense to me, and it's really helped me to contextualize our relationship, the way that we interact, but also just that idea in general that there is a real difference between those two things. And some people just want what you're providing, which is, how long has it hurt? How can I help? And would you be comfortable with the descriptor of kind of a homespun, folksy kind of presentation?
As a description of me,
Yeah.
I'm homespun and folksy.
Yeah.
I would be more comfortable with brilliant and analytical and articulate.
And I'm not saying that those are mutually exclusive.
But in a homespun, folksy kind of delivery.
It just feels to me like when I'm reading your stuff that I get a real chicken soup for the soul kind of feeling.
Well, I hope so. I hope people hear that when they listen.
Yeah.
Or read it as a podcast. Yeah, I think so. I think it's, again, comes back to my efforts to listen and understand and not be judgmental in the sense of making a morality judgment. Oh, you're a bad person, or you've done a bad thing. Shame, shame. Let's guilt you into behaving differently, or frighten you into behaving. That's not what counseling and therapy are about for me. I have learned so much about the incredible endurance and strength of the human soul, people's ability to survive some of the most horrendous things. And part of that happens because you create a window of safety where they can get in touch with those things and not decompensate. They don't have to break down. They don't have to get arrested. They don't have to act out. They can experience, digest, process, grow. And we often describe therapy as reparenting. You know, we have to change the parental scripts that you've internalized from childhood that were given to you by your parents and your school teachers and your church and your community about your acceptability and your worth and your value, and about the appropriateness with which you view the world. So the accuracy with which you view the world and your place in it. So a lot of therapy is about uncovering those scripts, putting them on the table, looking through them, and saying, now as a grown-up, bringing your own cards to the table, can you rearrange these things? Can you see them differently? Are they getting in the way of you living your life? So that's what I try to write about. And you get there, but you often start with more fundamental physiological panic attack, hyper breathing, fear response, anger management, managing your behaviors, your feelings, your emotions. You talk more quickly, more urgently about appropriate management of emotions as a critical ingredient.
Yeah.
So we discussed that in the book. We discussed that in our podcast week to week.
And when you had talked about the idea of therapy being a form of reparenting, yes, we've talked about that both as educators but also as clinicians for a long time. And the thing that I really like about the book is we have it divided into three separate sections. So childhood, infancy, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And in the infancy childhood section, we really go through that process of those early script indoctrinations and how that process plays out, which I think is really helpful for people, even if you're looking at it through the prism of being an adult, seeing how those early childhood experiences were so seminally important, I think can really help you gain an understanding and an appreciation for how maybe you do want to look at those things and tweak maybe some of that internal dialogue, which you can do as an adult, to try and more accurately approximate the person that you would like to see yourself be.
Yeah, I attempt to explain to clients, but also in writing this book, my view of that is that you internalize scripts about life and about yourself as a child that never go away, that never change. You will hear those messages all your life. So if you are taught as a child that you're overly, you have an overdeveloped sense of entitlement. You're not really entitled to good things happening in your life because you're broken or bad or unworthy in these ways. You may grow up and that fades into the background because life intrudes and other things happen. So you get messages at school, you get messages from your Cub Scout leader or your Boy Scout leader or your baseball coach or what have you about your worth and your value and so on. And so you develop multiple perspectives. But when you get a pebble in your shoe and it hurts to walk, those voices come back and you hear those messages. So they will play out in your relationships as an adolescent and as an adult, which are the two other segments that we address in the book, and come back and haunt you and create problems for you. So as an adult, I can sit here and look at that scripting and say, well, that's not really how I experienced myself. I'm not really too stupid to go to college. But I was told as a child aggressively by a number of people that I was. Now I can say, well, I taught at a college for 35 years. So how do you square that circle? So I can change the script. And I believe that therapy can help me do that. And I think that if I come in as a client and I present those messages to you, if you help me create that space where I can bring them out in the open and discover them, then you can help me say, well, let's just take an eraser here and a magic marker and change the script. And then as long as I am focused and continuing to stay focused, I can follow the new script. But whenever I get blindsided by something, the old one is still in there and it will still raise its ugly head. Then I have to have a conversation with myself or my wife or my therapist or whoever I rely on to ground me and say, wait a minute, you're falling back into some stinking thinking, and we can pull it back up and get you focused again and not get hurt.
So I tell people, and you've heard me say this probably, I don't know how you feel about me saying this, but that the maturity of your coping strategies is always inversely proportional to the perception of emotional intensity in the situation. Meaning that we can reparent a client and we can teach them, because my philosophy, you rightly identified earlier, that I'm all about emotional regulation. I think people don't go to therapy because they have problems. They go to therapy because a problem they have causes emotional dysregulation. If you can emotionally regulate, you don't need help. If you can't emotionally regulate, it doesn't matter how small your problem is, you're floundering. So when we help people to do this rescripting, and part of that is the development of more mature coping strategies and better emotional regulation. You can learn how to do that, and you can be really good at that in 99% of your encounters. But there's going to be a time when you're going to be fighting with your significant other, or you're going to be afraid that you're going to get fired. Something's going to happen that's going to ratchet up the emotional intensity. And when that happens, you're going to devolve to more infantile coping strategies.
Well, for instance, again, talking about our divergent perspectives, we have an understanding that trauma memories, trauma experiences from early childhood are like one trial learning. And you may suppress those. You may use your defense mechanisms to compensate for them and go through life. But if I was traumatized by my father physically from physical abuse as a child. I internalized early warning cues. When I come home from school, I would know. We'll open the front door and not see a soul. I would know, is this a bad day to be home? Is this a dangerous day to be home? Walk on eggshells because Dad's already dangerous. You develop the sensitivity of that. So later in life, I go to work for somebody. I get a foreman in a factory and I'm working, and I go walk in and he's standing there ready to talk to me, and I'm picking up the same nonverbal cues. He hadn't said a word, but I just, the aura that comes off of him flashes to my father, and I instinctively have the same reaction in his presence that I had from that messaging from my dad.
Right.
So in therapy, we can break all that down and identify it and pull it into focus and say, how is this affecting the way that you behave on the job? How is this affecting your security? How does this affect your ability to communicate? Even the assumptions that you're making. Maybe the guy hadn't said anything to you yet.
Exactly.
Maybe he's having a bad day at home.
Right.
Came in, had a fight with his wife and kids, and he looks up at you. You see your dad and all enraged signals flying, and you readjust your behavior, and no conversation happened.
Right.
So then later, there's a misunderstanding, and you have a history of job problems that are similar to that.
Well, and you're making such an excellent point, because that person is the person who is the employer.
Yeah.
I mean, the employee is saying, you were aggressive,
Yeah.
and the manager's saying, I wasn't.
I didn't say boo.
even say
I didn't say
anything.
hello.
Right?
Yeah.
But they both believe their perceptions, and that's the power of these scripts, is that they create an expectation of how the world is and what our safety is in that world, even when people aren't verbally
There used to be a lot of books written about the inner child and doing inner child work, and thank God we've grown beyond that as a conversational focus. But it's still a real thing, because what we're saying is you internalized these scripts and costume sets for how life impacts you. And when something triggers them, and it can be something nonverbal, it can be a smell, it can be a sound, it can be a sight. All of a sudden that script just envelops you, and that can cause problems.
Right.
So part of the journey of therapy is to make the effort to see, is what's going on in your life today being triggered by these early trauma experiences or early script experiences, that as an adult you can say, wait a minute, back off here, Jack. Let's calm this thing down and be a little more objective. What skills do I need to be able to do that? Can you teach me those skills as a therapist? Can you teach me how to regulate my breathing, to reduce my anxiety, to refocus my intelligence, to make choices that are different from the ones I have been making? If so, therapy can be beneficial. So that's what we are trying to do in writing this book, with our divergent perspectives that do come together at the end in terms of saying the journey of therapy is a healing journey, and we will take it with you. We can't give it to you. We can't say to you, this is what you need to do. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm smart, you're dumb. We say, let's sit down and talk and spend time together and take our masks off one directionally. You take yours off, because it's a boundary issue. I'm not supposed to sit there and talk to you about, well, when I was 15. So how do we dance this dance to get you to a place where what is painful in your life is less painful, what is disruptive in your life is less disruptive, and you feel going forward more empowered and strong in making choices to make your life be what you want it to be.
So we're out of time for this podcast, but I am very aware that I don't think either one of us has actually spoken the name of the book.
Is there a name? Do we have a title?
We have a title.
All right, what is it?
It is Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide for Being Human.
All right. And hopefully you'll all go out and buy it.
Hopefully everyone, by the time you hear this, there will be links in the description below that will take you to a place where you can purchase the book. So,
and we know that we have listeners in Australia, we have listeners in England, and France, and all over America.
We're very excited.
And hopefully this book will just race around the world.
Before we leave, your favorite part of this process?
The conclusion.
the conclusion like it's
Having
over
it be
and
a
now.
real tangible object in my hands.
Yeah. I think that's mine too. And as we were talking to the publisher today, I said it feels like having a child.
I remember, because I've co-written 2 other books with another author, and I remember the author and I, Dr. Kathy Maupin, we were in London, England for something for the publisher of the book. We walked into a local bookstore that's similar to Barnes and Noble and found the book on the shelf.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Oh my gosh.
my name's on that.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at these books, and we asked the sales clerk at the desk. They had a half dozen of them on the counter. Would you like for us to sign those? And they were, of course, looking at us like, no. What's wrong with you Americans? You know, we don't want that. So, but anyway, it was that exciting. So this is that exciting for me as well.
So hopefully you guys will run out and buy the book, enjoy the book, let us know how you
get a digital copy or a hard copy.
Right.
They'll both be available.
Now, I will say the one advantage in my mind of the digital copy is that in the references, you then have the links, which makes it very easy to just go to and find those references for additional information. So obviously people have preferences about whether they would prefer to have a book on their shelf or have it on their Kindle. I'm not really worried about whether or not people want to buy a physical copy. I would like to have a physical copy because I want one on my shelf.
Yeah.
But the advantage of the digital copy is that those references are easily accessible in the digital copy, just as a FYI.
Okay.
So the music that appears, I'm not able to talk again. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.